Please subscribe and hit the like button.
Well, good evening. Welcome to Yada Yawa. I have not even begun the first point yet, and I am calling for a mulligan. I've had a very interesting week. Right after the show last week, I came down with Omicron. So I can speak more from a position of experience regarding the coronavirus than I could previously. It is an interesting situation. I was going to report last week that the national statistics were during the first week of December, that you were 500% less likely to get the coronavirus if you had the two vaccines plus the booster. 5 times is a lot. We're not talking about 10% less likely or 50% less likely or 99% less likely. No, the fact is that here for America, at the first week of December, you were 5 times less likely to get corona. And it's even more telling than that. The likelihood of serious disease requiring hospitalization and or a mortuary death was 15 times greater for the unvaccinated. So worldwide, what we had experienced in December and the months prior to that was a pandemic of the unvaccinated. It was serves you right kind of thing. And so something happened, though, that was unexpected. We always know that that viruses mutate. And their standard mutation pattern is to become more virulent so that they infect a higher percentage of people more readily and less lethal, because they don't want to kill their host because they can't survive without a host. And so here comes the most modified version of the corona of all. It's called Omicron, is the name that we're ascribing it. And it's a wildfire. It could be in a country 2 weeks and become the dominant strain. For those that don't know, they haven't been following it, the new cases of coronavirus in the United States have tripled from their previous high. So this time a year ago, we, on the worst days, had 200,000 new cases. And now we're having 600,000 new cases a day. That's a staggering number. In a country of 325 million to have 600,000. Those are the tested positive cases. And I'm here to tell you the actual number is somewhere between 10 to 15 times that. And there's a reason for that. No one in their right mind is going to get tested now. They're not even tracking coronavirus positive testees anymore. The numbers are just too staggering. There is nothing that can be done to stop this. And what's interesting about that is that prior to this time, the numbskulls that claim that they are following the science and are doing exactly the opposite, like Fauci, would have you believe that the compassionate and scientific and responsible thing to do was lockdowns. Shut down business, deprive people of their liberty. It was completely and utterly ineffective. All it did was destroy the currency, destroy the economy, destroys people's character, destroy their lives. It was devastating for children, devastating for women, devastating for those who had psychiatric problems or drug and alcohol problems. It was many, many, many times worse than the virus. And yet, they won't apologize for it, the liberals. They want to do the same thing. And now we are dealing with something that literally is a wildfire being pushed by hurricane gust winds. Virtually everyone is going to get Omicron. Now, that's not just a bad thing. The third booster, the first booster, the third overall shot in the vaccine regimen, had a 10-week useful life. After 10 weeks, it was only 35% effective. And so while it has a tremendous effect against the Delta variant, still the 90 percentile, and while it will keep you out of the hospital and it will keep you out of dead, which is always a good thing, you have many more options when you're not in the mortuary. There are considerably more people who recover in hospitals than in funeral homes. And so there was still and is still a huge advantage of being vaccinated, but this virus is beating the vaccines. And so we have zero chance of vaccinating our way out of it. We are going to go through a really rough patch here. Now, it's not that Omicron isn't deadly. It's just that its death is very rare, and if you're vaccinated, well, no one has died of Omicron that has been triple vaccinated. No one. And while there are hospitalizations of triple vaccinated Omicron victims, the percentage of the population hospitalized with serious illness is about the same that you would expect from the flu or from a cold or just the run-of-the-mill things that go wrong in people's lives. But one of the things that's really positive about it is that for most people, the symptoms are more like a really bad cold or a really bad flu. You get the runny nose, you get the fever, you get the cough, you get the body aches and pains, you get fatigue. With a minority of people, about a quarter of them, you lose your sense of smell. With about half of that, you lose your sense of taste. And one of the unique symptoms is an overall excruciating headache that nothing treats. You could eat a hamburger of Excedrin migraine, and it would still mock you. And that's the headache that I got. And so the reason I'm calling for a mulligan is I was payday today for some of the workers here remodeling this home, and the last guy that was here, I wrote the date twice on the amount line. So you're just going, okay, do it once. That's embarrassing. Do it twice in a row. Okay, something's wrong. So there's a possibility that I will trip over my tongue. Now that happens to be finish the Omicron story, and then I'll tell you about tripping over my own tongue. Mm-hmm. Omicron, because those who are triple vaccinated and get Omicron, the initial indication is that their long-term immunity is vastly superior to the vaccines alone. And it's not only greater length of time is the indication, because we're seeing a very slight drop-off in antibodies versus a fairly rapid one, but you get super immunity. So this could be the perfect storm for solving corona. You're still a nincompoop if you don't get vaccinated, and you're risking your own life and others. But so be it. Conspiratorialists are not the smartest people in the world. In fact, they're probably the least smart. But that's where we are. On stammering from time to time, I sometimes trip over English words and very often trip over Hebrew words. And when I began this show, it was Jim Doyle that was the one that prodded me into doing it probably now 15 or more years ago. One of my concerns was I don't want to embarrass Yah. I could embarrass myself. At that point, I really didn't. When you're on the front page of a national magazine, throwing you into a manure pile, you don't much care about embarrassment. But we were endeavoring to represent Yahweh. And you don't want to make a fool of yourself. And I was really quite concerned that my diction, particularly on Hebrew words, would be a problem. I didn't want to do it. I wanted to stick with writing because in writing you have a chance, particularly when you have world-class editors and fact-checkers like we have in the Covenant family, you got a chance to get it right. Think about it. And the spoken word is a very different thing than the written word. Yahweh has an overwhelming preference for the spoken word. But in the second volume of the Introduction to God, which is now available for purchase, Jackie did a marvelous job on it. The edit team did a marvelous job. It's now available for purchase. And it's in the top 3 books out of the 20. I'd say that the Introduction to God 1 is probably the single best book we have compiled. ITG 2 would be second, and then the Moed, volume 6 of Yada Yah would be the third best. One of the things that God says over and over again is that his final witness, the goy who shows up in the last day to knock some sense into his people, that not only does he speak a foreign tongue, his diction isn't so hot. And so it's really funny in a way. Yahweh introduced his name to the world through a mumbler. Now, when I say mumbler and Moshe, when you read what Moshe said, that guy was, well, I think that he passes even Dode in terms of being brilliant and articulate. But nonetheless, he thought that was a qualification for having the role of introducing himself and his name to the world, somebody that did not pronounce words very well. And so now that he is reintroducing his name to the world, he picks someone whose diction isn't very good. There's a few items of the news that I wanted to share with you. One is on the Ukraine. Now, the Ukraine doesn't like to be called the Ukraine. They just want to be called Ukraine, which is why I call them the Ukraine. I don't like the Ukraine. I don't like the Ukraine because in terms of Jew-hating, Jew-bashing, they're in the top 3 or 4 worst countries in the world. I don't like people like that. They're money-grubbing scumbags in terms of their governance and their military and everything else. They can't live independently. They need to steal money from others. And there's probably no country on earth that is more readily prostituting its women. So not my favorite place. Putin has got himself in quite a fix. Putin has over 100,000 troops on the border of the Ukraine. And he has told the United States, they're there because of you. Not there because of the Ukraine. They're there because of you. You think that you can shoo Russia away from Cuba and the Cuban Missile Crisis because we had a military presence in America's backyard. And so we agreed to remove those missiles with a commitment. The United States would never invade Cuba. The United States has invaded the Ukraine. We've given them countless weapons. We want to make them part of NATO. And Russia said, no, we're not going to have a United States military presence and all your damn weapons in our backyard. So if you continue to do it, we're going to invade. And of course, the United States, who is the most hypocritical nation on earth, says, nah, 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 if you invade, then we're going to put sanctions on you, bad boy. That's ridiculous. And then everybody wants to condemn Putin for being the bad guy when the belligerent here is the United States. We just have, as a people, no context. Now, the Russians aren't all that swell either. So this is a funny combination of things. Funny in a pretty weird way, but what the heck, I'm kind of a weird guy. So you have Russia's ambassador, the lead Russian, which is the dominant nation now in the Iranian nuclear talks. And he comes out, and even the media is just having a field day with him, saying that, oh, we finally have somebody that, you know, is willing to tell the unvarnished truth as to why we ought not be so worried about Iran and a nuclear bomb. He actually said, so what if Iran gets a nuclear bomb? Big deal. Why does it matter? Unless they have a ballistic rocket to put it in, they have no way to deploy it. And he says, we have no idea how far they are away from having a ballistic missile. So we should just all take a chill pill and not worry about it if they develop a nuclear bomb. Guess what Iran did the next day? They launched a ballistic missile. They claim, oh, we're doing satellite research. There's 2 satellites in here. They're research satellites. What are they researching? Their ability to deliver a nuclear bomb? You know, they claim, oh, we put these satellites. Satellite means it's in orbit. Oh, we put these satellites up. They were well below the orbit necessary for a satellite. Perfect for a ballistic missile. And then you still have the idiots that write for the media say, but Iran says this nuclear program is for civilian purposes and they're not building a bomb. Oh, well, I hope it's idiots like that that are ground zero for the mushroom cloud that is about to emerge. Because Yahweh is not going to allow a nuclear bomb to roast Israel. But it is likely a nuclear strike from Iran that is going to imperil the world and bring it into World War III. But that was an interesting combination of statements to one day for the next. And no one has written a story that says, these talks are dead. France went on and said, oh, it's such a shame that as we were making such progress in our negotiations, they would do something like launch a ballistic missile. Yeah, right. We had an amazing thing that happened this week. Yes. The most popular author in the Hasidic world, ultra-Orthodox Judaism. There's the guys that walk around in the black morning suits, have the little curly Q's on the side of their head. Well, yes. One of their rabbis is a best-selling author. Not to anybody with a brain, to other Hasidic Jews. And his name is Walder. And Walder writes books for Hasidic children. Because what life is miserable for them. So he writes books to help ease the pain. Well, he also had a psychiatric clinic that was associated with his yeshiva. And guess what he liked to do there? Rape little girls. So he has been accused by some 20 women of having raped them. And so the chief rabbi, of course, these rabbis all love to be called chief rabbi because, you know, there was the chief priest, and they want to steal everything that is Yah corrupted for themselves. So the chief of the, and they have, by the way, about 47,000 chief rabbi positions because they got a chief rabbi of everything. But one particular chief rabbi, he is Chief Rabbi David Lau. He went and visited the Haredi, ultra-Orthodox, home of the dead author. Because you see, he committed suicide. Too embarrassing for him what he had done. So he committed suicide. He's a weasel on top of everything else. He committed suicide. So the chief rabbi said, this was my golden cow, man. We make money on everything. So we got to figure out how we're going to keep the gravy train going. And he went to the widow's home, cut his deal. Never once did he say, it's tragic that this man went so far and raped little girls. Never apologized for that. Never went and said, I need to go and console the victims. No, because they were women, and rabbis hate women. No, didn't do any of that. He just went and he met with the widow and then left. These boys are scum, and I'm going to tell you, God hates them. The only chance that a Jew has to return to Yah is to walk away from Judaism. There is the possibility that Yah's last witness will also be one of the two witnesses that will stand beside Eliah in the last days. And based upon what is written in Yeshayah, it's no more Mr. Nice Guy. I always say, just use your words. If you don't have words, you can't make a good argument with words, then just get out of the way. There's no purpose for fists or knives or guns unless you are defending your immediate family from immediate harm. Well, that's not the way it's going to be in the end. God's going to extract recompense sevenfold. So there is a guy that I would have no empathy for. His name is Abbas. He is now accusing Israel of organized terrorism and ethnic cleansing. This is the a-hole that came up with the notion of pay for slay. He's the one that encourages Muslims to go terrorize Jews. He is the one who came up with this vakakta stupid map that says this was all Palestinian land. Those Jews, they took it from us. Those dastardly Jews, of which the progressives in this country say, yeah, we're stupid too. I mean, let's put aside the moment. There is no such thing as a Fakistinian. There are none. That's a complete lie. But it's actually worse than that. Do you know that there is absolutely no land that was stolen taken by the Jews? That Arab leaders actually testified publicly under oath in 1937 as part of the Peel Commission. And universally, they stated categorically that no land was stolen from Arabs by the Zionists. The land that the Zionists received was all paid for by legal contracts. State lands and wastelands had been set aside for the Jewish population and were in the legal control of the colonial powers after World War I, and particularly not so Great Britain. Even the testimony of the Grand Mufti and others to Sir Laurie Hammond and his commissioners categorically verify that there was no land stolen. It's not their land. It was not stolen. And for what they have done in the perpetration of their lie, trying to take the land that belongs to the Jews away from them and terrorizing them in the process, should these witnesses encounter those supporting this, it's likely they're going to roast them alive. And you might say, oh, no, Yah's not a vicious God. That's just not going to happen. Bull. He is going to hold them accountable, recompense sevenfold. And so the only way he can be just to his people is to do this to not only the advocates of Islam, but also the leaders of Roman Catholicism, those who have promoted hate the Jew conspiracies, the progressives who are anti-Jewish today. One of the things I forgot to mention about coronavirus is that in China they have a new policy. It's called shaming. They dress, first they get a bunch of guys in black outfits and that look like stormtroopers, and then a bunch of them in white outfits that look like, zombies. And they stand on the left and right side of somebody also wrapped in completely in a white suit, white hood, white pants, white everything. Can't see their faces. So then they on their front and their back, they have like a 4 or 5 times larger than life picture of their face and then their name on their, and they parade them down the street, and then they parade them in cattle cars down more streets. And the thing is, you're watching a country have these black and white troops. It looks like something out of the evil empire from Star Wars. And then more black and white troops on the side of the road. But they set up grandstands for spectators. The streets are lined 5, 10, 15, 20 people deep to watch this spectacle. We're talking about people so far removed from moral decency, it's even hard to fathom it. But that's what's happening in China. In Lebanon, there's article after article now that says that the country has been eviscerated by its financial crisis. No, that's not true. It has been eviscerated by its Islamic crisis. Mm-hmm. Hezbollah now controls it. Hezbollah has a singular goal, which is to use Iranian missile and drone technology to destroy Israel and, in the process, Lebanon. Pretty darn amazing. So it's a crazy world out there. Things are going to get exceedingly bad for the chosen people. Yahweh is waiting with open arms, but you got a lot of explaining to do. If you're Jewish, you are our target audience. You're the people we're most interested in reaching. They're the people that Yahweh is most interested in reaching. But for you to engage in a relationship with them, you're going to have to leave rabbinic influence. In fact, renounce it. You're going to have to leave political parties and Israel, which should be easy because there are 4,769 of them. And so,
really,
yeah, I mean, good grief! You've got a prime minister now that formed his government by giving some $6 billion to Islamic terrorists so that they would vote for him. I mean, think of how grotesquely immoral that is. And it replaced a government that could have been as immoral as any Israel has ever had, and they've had some bad ones, with Netanyahu bribing the Hasidic, the ultra-Orthodox Jews, to vote for him in forming a government and bribing them in every which way. So this reads that Israel is still going to be exceedingly divided. Yahweh's list of political parties is a little shorter than mine, but you get the point. Mm-hmm. Then the land and earth shall mourn, with the nations and races, political and religious groups. This is mishva'ak, social and cultural identities with divided loyalties, families and clans, kingdoms and tribes, the common people, and the aristocratic religious and political leaders. From Mai to question and shafaf, lip service, their verbose speeches, by themselves boasting about their false prophets. That'd be the religious leaders, the popes, for example. The political and religious divisiveness, along with the social and cultural institutions with their discordant rhetoric. Oh, who says he can't talk? That sounds pretty sophisticated by itself, doesn't it?
How dare they?
Discordant rhetoric.
Well,
yes, the house of Dod, also known as Israel, isolated and by themselves, boasting about their religious leaders. Their women, ever prideful, mistaken, and by themselves. The political and religious divisiveness of the house of Nathan, which is the gifted family, by itself, and their women by themselves. The divided loyalties and growing schism of the house of Loi, priests, isolated by itself along with their wives by themselves, as well as the divisive and discordant rhetoric of Shimei, the descendants of Shimei, who was a Benjamite in the house of Shaul. He is famous for having thrown rocks at Dod, something Christianity and Judaism
smart.
do quite well.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you that is if you want to find the fastest way to hell, if that should be your intent, throw rocks at Dod. Take Dod's title, Messiah and Son of God, and give them to someone else and see how God responds to you. Well, this is a multi-layered pronouncement, and I suspect that the initial mention of Eretz in this context can be read as either the land, as in Israel, or the entire earth. Both are going to mourn, albeit for some of the same reasons. The world will be at war. Mankind has become ignorant and irrational. You can have Iran launch a missile one day, and the day before you can say, let them build a bomb. They don't have a missile. And you don't bother to come back the next day and say, oops, sorry about that. Maybe we ought to be alarmed. Mankind is just ignorant, irrational, religious, political, conspiratorial, militaristic. Currencies have been rendered worthless, and the world's economies are in shambles.
Mm-hmm.
Mishpachah is equally adept at distinguishing between nations and races, political parties, or religious institutions. These have run amok, not only in Israel but elsewhere. Just as we have witnessed in America with the widening schism between liberal and conservative, which is at probably the greatest extreme in American history. Israel is unable to establish a stable government. Now, some would say, come on, you got a prime minister, he's been there for 6 months or so, how could you say that? They're one vote out of the coalition, and it's over. And 6 of the votes come by way of a Muslim terrorist. And on top of that, in recent polls, the party of the prime minister doesn't even get enough votes to even be considered for the office. You have to have at least 6 seats. And right now, they're polling at 4. Well, the majority party, Likud, is polling at around 36 seats. And yet, they have absolutely no influence in the government. Now, I'm not a Likud fan. I'm not political. I made a horrible mistake in thinking that Netanyahu was a decent leader for Israel, mainly because he's the only leader who had the courage to say there's no such thing as a Palestinian. And I had really no idea as to how extensively he had bribed the ultra-Orthodox religious to get his position in power, or just how overly fixated on his own personal enrichment and empowerment he was as opposed to his country's betterment. So Israel is in a horrible position in terms of its governance. If you want to talk about lip service, divisive rhetoric, it's Israel. I came to the conclusion the other day, even my wife thought this might be extreme, but I'm convinced it's true. The reason for anti-Semitism, the reason for conspiracy theories, the reason people believe that the memoirs of the elders of Zion is really a true story. The reason that the Holocaust happened, the reason there are so many derogatory images and statements said about Jews is not actually the fault of Goyim, of right-wing wackos, of progressive liberals. No, it isn't. The reason is because of rabbis. And it's because the rabbis are exactly as they are stereotyped. Swindlers. Dishonest. Yeah. Monsters, really. They are the reason that Jews have been slandered this way. It's your rabbis. They are pedophiles. They are child rapists. They are sucking the lifeblood out of the people and country. Swindlers. Everything that the caricatures have depicted. Israel, meet your enemy. It's your rabbis. Even look at the title. Oh,
yeah, anti-Semitic.
Rabbi. Yeah, exalted.
Yeah. Oh, that. Yes. I'm sorry, exalted one. Yeah.
Yep. Well, the world should be ashamed. There is an ever-growing and yet completely unwarranted confidence. The boasting is derived from placing one's faith in false prophets or rabbis, as the case may be, and that has become particularly bad. And nowhere has blind faith in liars become more invasive than among the Haredi in Israel. In this regard, it is useful to know that the Haredi are wholly dysfunctional. They lack everything other than the arrogance and religious indoctrination. They value nothing beyond their Babylonian Talmud, which these incompetent and irrational nincompoops stupidly call the Torah. They're unemployable by design. A rabbinical plots to control every aspect of their lives is to keep them ignorant and unemployable. They are in a religious ghetto, self-imposed. They become parasites who will do nothing but cry when the world comes crashing down around them. Their women have no rights and have become as useless as the men. But sadly, like Muslims, they breed like rabbits with the average of 7 children per household. Currently, at 20% of Israeli Jews, they are doubling every 16 years. So upon Yahweh's return, a third of Israeli Jews will be unsalvageable and worthless, a blight on the house of Daud. They are, as Yahweh has predicted, isolated and divisive crybabies. Now, I'm sure that there are some covenant members and many others who would listen to this and say, that's the guy, he's just way too out of touch with political correctness, way too pejorative, way too critical, way too demeaning. He has no respect for the religion or the people. He's being anti-Semitic. No, I am probably the foremost lover of Shem, Yahweh's name, on earth.
Okay.
There is no one. Yeah, there's no one on this planet who has invested more time trying to reach out and save Yehudim, Jews. No one. The problem here is that Jews have done this to themselves. They have made themselves ignorant, and the rabbis have done a masterful job of doing something that's incredibly stupid. They have equated being Jewish with the religion and not with the ethnicity. A rabbi will be writing an opinion piece, and he says, by telling you that no Jew is going to end up in hell and that only Goyim are going to end up in hell, we're not being xenophobic or racist. No, because anyone can convert to Judaism. What an idiot. Judaism has nothing to do with the ethnicity of Jews. God is calling his people home. That is the ethnicity, the race of Israelites and Jews, Yehudim, while completely excluding Judaism. Personally, I share Yahweh's disgust for them, which is why I'm glad that they no longer learn English. The Haredi masters, the rabbis, are so afraid of losing control, they will not allow anyone in the Haredi community to have access to the internet, to have access to a cell phone that will connect them with the internet, to even give them an access to a cell phone that will allow them to dial a rape or pedophile helpline or spousal abuse line. They are given what's called a kosher phone that has all of those numbers blocked and no access to a book like series like Yada Yada. Personally, I don't think there's any hope for them. Secular Israelis have heard more than enough of their demeaning and condescending rhetoric and will not continue to support their nasty habits. The creation of the religious welfare state is the dirty secret of Benjamin Netanyahu, who was particularly fond of both receiving and offering bribes. And he bribed the rabbis to garner their votes so that he could become prime minister in the dysfunctional parliamentary system of the Israeli governance. If there ever was a place for mishpa'ach, political and religious divisiveness and discordant rhetoric, an unsurmountable chasm between working men and women and the hopelessly religious, it is in Israel today. The Hasidic Haredim have isolated themselves by boasting about their religious leaders. They are separated and still prideful, with unwarranted confidence, placing their faith in that which is untrue. Now, stop a moment.
Mm-hmm.
If this rhetoric bothers you, if me holding rabbis accountable, telling you what they really are, me holding the religion of Judaism accountable, telling you what it really is bothersome, then go away. Yahweh is not going to get along with you either. Yahweh is openly condemning of Judaism. Torah, prophets, and Psalms are literally filled with condemnation of Judaism and of rabbis in particular. And at this time, in this culture, is when he's condemning them. And so if you don't like me because I'm condemning Judaism and rabbis, this for sure as hell you're not going to like Yahweh, because he does so aggressively. And one of the things that Yahweh says of his last witness is that he's going to follow a father's example and be overtly condemning of the rabbis and of the Jewish religion. No, it's not the only bad religion on earth. You know, gone out of her way. The 4 volumes of Questioning Paul will certainly dissuade you from being a Christian if you read them. Prophet of Doom and its 1,000 pages will certainly preclude you from being a Muslim if you'll read it. We are a equal opportunity hater when it comes to religion. And there's probably nothing more loving you can do in life
than
hating religion and liberal politics and conspiracy. Those are the worst influences in the world today. So we have Yahweh saying things about the house of David, Israel, that they are isolated and by themselves, placing their faith in their deceitful religious leaders. But what are we to make about the house of Nathan? Why would he bring up a house of Nathan? There's no tribe called Nathan. Here we have 2 choices. On the positive side, we have a prophet, a man who actually intervened between David and Yahweh during the king's decline and mental acuteness. He brought us one of the most important and misunderstood prophecies ever recorded. It is the prophecy that without it, we're not here. It is the prophecy that began translation. It's the prophecy that started me to question everything. Samuel 2, 2 Samuel 7, is Nathan's conversation with Yahweh on David's behalf. It is, to my mind, the single most misunderstood, the single most important prophecy ever recorded. Those who understand it know the who, what, when, and why, as well as the past and the future. They know what's going to happen. And then there was the Nathan who was David's son. This Nathan was the 4th born to Bathsheba and the 11th overall. But other than being listed among David's progeny, nothing is said of him. And yet we know that the seed of Bathsheba is tainted. The way David acquired her hand in marriage was exceedingly offensive to Yahweh, in that he sent a good man off to war, expecting him to die, wanting him to die, to take his wife. Their firstborn died as a result. Then, before he could be named, the second died. Their firstborn died before he could be named. The second actually was Solomon. Talk about a guy that started off well and ended poorly. And to a large degree, the thing that brought Solomon down was the very thing he said he didn't want. He told Yah, I want wisdom. And God said, listen, because you've said you wanted wisdom, I'm going to give you everything else, including a long length of days and riches. Well, as Solomon became richer, he decided that more wives were better than fewer wives, and had such a collection of them. And he was an international connoisseur. So his foreign wives all had foreign gods, and so he didn't end his life very well. But the second born was Solomon, whose lust for power, wealth, and women proved enormously corrupting. And that bad is divisive and isolating. Perhaps it is this very distinction of the product of a prophet, or the effect and lust of a man that was contemptible, and it's comparing the difference between these things, such as the mishpach, divided loyalties of the house of Nathan. There were 2 other names in this prophecy. Again, they provide a contrast considering what they represent. Yahweh chose the Loe to serve his people. Their role was to help everyone understand the Torah and to capitalize effectively on the Moed Mikre. Their purpose was ultimately negated, not by God, but instead by the wiles of men. The priests became corrupt, something which became especially apparent during the row between Jezebel and Elijah. And they were better off dead. And next, rabbis would replace them, claiming their authority for themselves. Shimei started off badly and then became duplicitous. He was known for throwing dirt into the air and stones at Dode. He was like the raving wild man that we would normally associate with the house of Benjamin. And he came from the same stock as King Shaul, as well as the wannabe prophet and apostle Shaul, Paul. In him we see Shaul Paul, who did far worse than cloud the air while seeking the demise of Dode. He wrote and spoke the most duplicitous and divisive mishvah, religion and political rhetoric conceivable. He was bad, arrogant, and dishonest, writing letters inspiring gospels which would lead directly to a showdown between the Benjamite and Yahweh's Loe on Kippurim. So that's a lot from that particular passage, and it's one of many where you can look at it from a lot of different angles, and many of them are true simultaneously. Did you take any of the words in particular, Kirk, or has it been a long week? I think there and
it's been that.
Yes.
There's Mishpacha, because it appeared several times in 12 and also in here.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking it up just to see what it says, as I generally do in all the different sources. And of course, it's clan of family, but it's Israel. I mean, in the context of what he's talking about. And then, as most of the sources I use, they'll say this is related to this, and see the verb, and et cetera. And there's actually 6 words counting Mishpacha. And one of them is I'm terrible on this too. Shipakah, which is unmarried maidservant. And I looked at that and I said, okay, the first one is Israel, the family. The second one is unmarried maidservant. And I thought to myself, well, how does that relate to Israel? Well, Yahweh divorced them. The second one I found was Shabbat, which is to be swept bare, to wind sweep, to blow away. Nations destroyed the land of Israel, salted it. You can't get much worse than what the Romans did. Mishpach, that means to flow of blood or bloodshed. I mean, no one, the Goy, I don't call them nations, the Goyim, mostly, they massacred them in great numbers on every opportunity. The next one associated with that word is Mishpaha, which is the hay at the end of it, and it means to be veiled and to spread out. Veiled, I took that to mean, or interpreted, it's just my interpretation, they were sent away, and the spore, they were spread out, sent away, carried away, and they were also hidden away when they got to places like Rome. They were put in one spot, and they had to stay there. And usually it was a disgusting place to live. And then the other one was Shephakiach, which is a scab, but it's also something that spreads out all by itself rather than be sown. As the seed grows, that's and also a disease. Well, the disease, of course, is religion. And it was just interesting that there's that much in one word. And I don't expect everybody to fall in love with that like that. But I mean, you've got so much already written here just to absorb and learn it. But it's interesting that it's. I do it to verify things and also to see what I can discover. And it's just wow, another wow moment for me.
So speaking of both scabs and religion, tonight is Janus Eve. Janus is the god of duplicity and of beginnings and endings in Rome, of which the the day is January. The month was named. I think it was Steve that was writing in the chat room earlier this morning that it is from Janus that we get the English word anus, and it's exceedingly appropriate for Romans. There were and are lots of anuses in Rome. It's easily the most despicable civilization in human history, and the one that grew out of it, out of Imperial Rome, the Roman Catholic Church, being probably the most menacing institution in all of time. And so that is what this evening is. My guess is that there's no one that is part of this community that celebrates the Roman gods' day. And even the idea of a New Year's Day is wholly inconsistent with Yahweh. His new year begins in the month of Abib. It is known for the first light of renewing light on a moon, closest to the time that barley is still green and growing and receptive in the ear of the plant. That essentially is the new moon, just the first sliver after a new moon. Closest to the vernal equinox would be the best way to figure the time today. That would be the first month of the year. He does not have a New Year's Day celebration, of course. Jews do, of course. Judaism has a New Year's. They go with the Babylonian head of the year, Rosh Hashanah, replacing Yahweh's Teruah. They have no idea that Teruah is their last hope. We are Teruah. When so many people want to know, well, when is the Teruah harvest is going to come? That ought not be the question you're asking. It's how can we fulfill Teruah? What we're doing tonight is the living embodiment of the fulfillment of Teruah. Isn't so much that harvest, it is what we are doing now. And Teruah is to openly condemn the things that are hostile and that are leading people away from Yahweh, and then to announce the good news, particularly to Yisrael and Yahudah, that Yahweh is calling you back home, that he has a name, that he has a plan, that he has a way, and he wants you to reject the way of man and embrace his. That is the fulfillment of Teruah. It's one of the reasons why Teruah is the only one of Yahweh's 7 Moed Mikre where we don't have a specific date. Yeah, it's gonna the harvest part of it's going to occur likely in 2029 on Teruah in 2029, but that truly is irrelevant. I mean, it really is irrelevant. What's relevant is that we are Teruah now. We're fulfilling Teruah. Our Exodus doesn't fulfill Teruah.
No, it just ends it.
There is no benefit of openly condemning Judaism and Israeli politics and advocating the Torah about us being swept off the planet. We're Teruahing now. This is the fulfillment of it. And we have perhaps just 7 years left to accomplish that mission.
Well said.
So here is a recap of what we have been considering in terms of this, the 12th chapter of Zechariah. And remember now, every word of Zechariah serves one purpose: to describe the events before and immediately after, as well as during Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippurim is the single most important day, not only annually with Yahweh, but the fulfillment of it in year 6,000 Yah is the single most important day in his entire existence. This is the day
Man.
that he is reunited with his people. So the entire book is devoted to it. And that's not uncommon. If you look, Yeshaya is becoming a very simple book, even though it is enormously long, even though the vocabulary is the most complex read anywhere. But the book of Yeshaya is very much like Zechariah. Yeshaya means Yah was saved. Zechariah means remember Yah. And the message of Yeshaya is religion sucks. God damn religion. Because my people suck because they are religious, and I can't relate to them, and I had to reject them and walk away from it, I couldn't find a single one of my people who wasn't either religious or political, and so there was not a single person I could work through. I had to resort to working with a goy. Imagine that. And so, he's a goy, so I had to give him all 7 spirits. I was going to make it even a goy functional. And from that point on, it's all about 3 topics. What this goy does to educate and awaken God's people. How unbelievably stubborn and counterproductive a huge percentage of God's people remain even until the end. And then finally, Yahweh's return with Dod, and how the day of return, Yom Kippur, is very much like the word that is used in conjunction with it, the verb anah. Yahweh's return is a celebration of anah, because on the positive side, for those who will listen to what God is trying to convey to you, anah means to reply, to answer. And it's you're answering the invitation God has issued on this day. But anah also means to afflict. And there's going to be enormous amounts of affliction. Every goy that came to attack Israel is going to be destroyed instantly. The religious on the earth. So let's read the 12th chapter. This is the prophetic pronouncement of Yahweh's word concerning Yisrael. Yahweh, who spread out and curved the universe and established the earth, and who shaped the impulse for the spirit inside of Adam, humankind, predicts, behold, I am preserving Jerusalem as the threshold and doorway of a reeling and staggering intoxication for all of the surrounding people, and also for those against Yehudah. This will exist during the siege, the methodical confining and process of surrounding the city and blocking off access during this time of trouble against Jerusalem, the source of instruction on reconciliation. It shall be during this time that I will cause Jerusalem to be an unmovable stone and difficult challenge for all the people. Everyone who attempts to move it will lacerate and impale themselves, and yet Gentiles from every ethnicity, nation, religion, and place on earth will gather against it. Boy, sometimes we just can't seem to get out of our own way.
Don't get it. No.
Yep. During that time, Yahweh declares prophetically, I will strike and destroy every fast-moving, flying weapon of war by confusing the drivers, causing them to be irrational and erratic. So for the sake of the house of Yehudah, I will keep my eyes open. And therefore, every one of these people, the people's fast-moving and flying weapons of war, I will afflict with the inability to see. Then the close friends and lovers of Yahweh will use their best judgment to say, for me, those who live and remain in Jerusalem are supported and empowered, strengthened, equipped, and enabled by Yahweh, their God, and his conscripts who assist. In that day, I will cause the close friends, related family, and lovers of Yahudah, the beloved of Yah, to be like a flaming rostrum in the timbers, and like a blazing torch among the stalks of fallen grain. And they will devour them to the right and to the left, enveloping all of the surrounding armies and peoples, while Jerusalem shall continue to be inhabited now and forevermore. Succeeding with one thing logically following another through time, all in Jerusalem. Yahweh will rescue and deliver, save and protect Yahudah's homes and households, first and foremost, and in the final phase, so that the honor and glory of the house of Dod and the splendor of the inhabitants of Jerusalem are not surpassed by Yahudah. On that day, Yahweh will defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and he will have their backs. You notice, there's only one group of people being talked about here. God's coming back for his people, Yisrael, Yahudah. You'll notice that there's only one God, and his name sure as hell ain't Jesus Christ. He is not, he ain't Allah either.
No.
It was modeled after Satan. He's most certainly not the founding fathers of the United States of America.
Hardly.
No.
Yes. Correct.
He ain't a pope. Nope. His name is Yahweh. And you either know him as Yahweh or you do not know him. It's one of the impediments of the rabbis is they will not speak, they will not write, they will not acknowledge Yahweh's name. And yet they claim to speak for a God whose name they despise.
Yes.
In that day, Yahweh will defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem. He will have their backs, and it will exist that the wayward, weak-kneed among them, that day will be likened unto Dod. And the house of Dod will be like God, similar to a spiritual implement and heavenly messenger of Yahweh in their appearance. Can you imagine? What he's saying is, listen, I give you credit. There are some tough as nails Israelis. There's some women that could kick my behind every way from the Shabbat and the IDF. So I'm not going to kid you. Obviously, the IDF has some tough defensive soldiers. But for the most part, particularly the rabbinical types, the little curly Qs, they have hands that you can see have never done any work. And God's saying that, listen, it's kind of bad what we've become. When you look at Tel Aviv, I think it's the highest percentage of homosexuals anywhere in the world. Got nothing against homosexuals, but most homosexuals are not big brawny dudes. God is saying that even the smallish, more feminine of Israelites as they exist today, they're going to be likened unto Dod. They're not going to be wish-washy. God likes strong men. He likes strong women. He likes men and women who will stand up, be accountable. They're not afraid to represent him, to condemn those things which are opposed to his people. God prefers strength, not meekness. He didn't say, it's going to be so wonderful because they're all going to be as meek as Dod. No, they're going to be likened unto Dod, and the house of Dod will be like God, similar to a spiritual implement and heavenly messenger. And it will come about at that time that I will seek to hold responsible and thus accountable, thereby choosing to decimate, to exterminate all of the Gentiles who have come against Jerusalem. And I will pour out upon the house of Dod and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of genuine mercy, of compassion, loyal love, and favorable acceptance, pleading for clemency and forgiveness. So they will look upon me, whom they by association have pierced, and they will lament, being exceedingly emotional over him, as one shrieks when reunited with someone special, making the family whole, anguished over him as one despairs over a firstborn. At that time, the shrieks, the shouts, will be loud and mournful in Jerusalem, and will be like the outcry of Hadad Rimnon in the valley of Megiddo, the gathering, invading, penetrating, and attacking of innumerable troops. Then the land and the earth shall mourn with the nations and races, political and religious groups, by themselves boasting about their false prophets, the political and religious divisiveness, along with the social and cultural institutions of the house of Dod, which is Israel. Isolated by themselves, boasting regarding their religious leaders with their undue confidence, their women ever prideful and mistaken by themselves, the political and religious dissension and discordant rhetoric of the house of Dathan by itself, and their women by themselves, and the divided loyalties and growing schism of the house of Loe, isolated and by itself, along with their wives and by themselves, and also the disruptive and contentious prose of the Shimei, the Benjamites of the house of Shaul, through rocks at Dod, separated and mistaken by themselves along with their wives. It's a time of great divisiveness. It's a time like no other. It's a last call. This time it's not a bar. This is the door to life. It is the last time any Jew is going to hear God's voice calling out to them to come out of Babylon, to come home. That's time to turn the page. We have, I think there's 5 chapters in the Moed volume devoted to Kippurim. And I might say, why would you call this one of the 3 best of the, I guess you have now 21 books is what we have that have been rewritten. Why would you call this in the top 3? And I think it is because it was our coming out party and our overt condemnation of Judaism. Mm-hmm. We had gradually woven that into the rewrites, but it comes full flower here. Second is that there are 2 days every year that are exceedingly important. Chag Matzah and Kippurim. Chag Matzah is the day that is most important to us. It's the day that we're perfected by our God, so we can be adopted into his family. And it is Kippurim that's the most important day to Yahweh, where he gets to reconcile his relationship with his wayward family. And so this whole volume is incredibly meaningful to us because it's focused on the day that's the happiest day in all of Yahweh's history. So this is Kippurim chapter 4 in volume 6, Moed of Appointments, coming home. More than anything, Yahweh wants his people to know the truth. It is the only cure for that which ails them and the only way to survive the outright onslaught which is headed their way. I'm going to share Zechariah 13:1. I'm going to have to go to sleep after I do this. My
sure.
One of the since my mind's not working all that well, I'm not quite aware of how many gaffes and blunders I have made this evening. So maybe I have made so many I should have stopped a while ago.
No.
But my issue right now is my right eye. One of the symptoms is the severe headache, but another is exceedingly irritated eyes. And my right eye in particular is so raw and sore that at this point it's like I have sandpaper in it. And so to read is difficult. I will tell you, though, that for somebody that says, all right, you've got God making all these promises to you, how in the world do you let you get sick? Oh, this was a godsend. And first of all, the first 3 days I had it, my head was so bad, and I knew I had to go into isolation. Two of the most productive days I've had in a long time. In fact, we finished volume 2 of ITG because of the actually 3 days of absolute isolation. So it was a very focused time where I could spend all day on it, and no one could bother me for any reason. So it was actually a productive time. The second part of it is that enduring pain, like everybody else, builds character. It builds fortitude. It's to have a life of no pain, of no suffering, of not having the tush sore at the end of the day because, well, I sat in the chair for 10 or 12, 14 hours. That's part of it. It's pushing through and knowing that the time is short and there's a job to do. If it was all puffery all the time, then what's the big deal? What would you be accomplishing? So you're going to have aches and pains. It goes with the course. It's also why eternity is going to be so wonderful. So we should not worry about the things that come along our way. So God is the only cure for the illness that really matters, which is religion. And the world's going to turn against his people. God's the answer. This is Zechariah 13:1, and we're going to call good night after this.
All right.
During that day, there will be a resource opened eliciting a response. Makor Patak, a fountain and wellspring which is released, flowing for all to hear and respond, for the house of Dod, and for the inhabitants of Jerusalem, to reconcile having been misdirected and wrong, and to purge the detestable corruption. The previous chapter was Dod this, Dod that, wasn't it? Everybody's going to be as bold and courageous as Dod. And here we begin again, the next chapter. It's a unique spirit is being poured out on the house of Dod. It is astonishing that Christians could carry this around in the book of Zechariah and not figure out that obviously it's Dod that is returning. Obviously that Dod is the central figure in God's overall relationship with humankind, means it's not Jesus, and that obviously Jesus is not the King of Kings who is coming back. There's no second coming of Jesus Christ. It always has been, always will be Dod.
Yeah, they didn't even change it in their Bibles.
Yeah, here is the second to last of the prophets, and he's not fixated on Moshe. He's not fixated on Christianity, for God's sake. No, he's fixated on the house of Dod, which is Yisrael, and this one individual man that represents the living embodiment of the covenant. He is the expression of what the Torah does for us. He is what God loves. He was passionate. He was articulate. He was brilliant. He was Torah observant. He defended Israel against all adversaries. He wrote the most beautiful songs ever sung. This is God's man. So during that day, there will be, wow, my eye is clouding over. A resource opened eliciting a response, which is the thing we want more than anything. We want the house of David. Yehudim and Israelites, Israelis and Jews. We want a door opened. We want a resource opened, eliciting a response for the house of David and for the inhabitants of Jerusalem to reconcile, having been misdirected and wrong, and to purge the detestable corruption. God is looking for David to come back and do two things. Put himself in the position of the final harvest. And then second, to eradicate all those that will harm his people. It is, again, the ultimate fulfillment of Teruah. And it's David that will be doing it. Well, folks, I do have to bid you tonight. It's probably certainly among the very few radio programs that has been broadcast by somebody with COVID. So at least you know we're willing to play injured, because this is important, what we're sharing. And you also know that with as much fear and concern as there has been out there, particularly with the 300% increase in the number of people who are infected and government having no credibility and no solution, that Israel, which is the test case for all of these things, is made the announcements that I shared earlier in the program that Omicron could be the great gift of God to save his people and humankind as a whole out of all of the horrible malfeasance we have perpetrated on ourselves with this virus. Omicron, I am hopeful. The first sign seems to indicate that it is so infectious that we're going to reach herd immunity, and and it's not going to kill a lot of people in the process, additional people in the process, and that we will finally be done with this. Now, interesting, I was reading seeing actually, there's a show while I was eating dinner tonight, and it showed Fauci's counterpart on, I don't think from the CDC, but the National Institute of Health. And there was this petition that was signed by some 900 of America's leading scientists, virologists, and professors, all that were experts in virology, and they basically said that you do not combat a virus by depriving people of their freedom. You don't combat a virus by depriving people of their livelihood. You do not defeat a virus by locking people up. And that those things will destroy the economy. And if you destroy the economy, we have no hope of recovery, because it's what has to pay for it. And that just don't do these kinds of things. Here's the science. What they're trying to do is wrong. And so the Fauci-esque man from the National Institute of Health said that was pseudoscience, because anything that conflicts with the politicized science is pseudoscience.
Their opinion, yeah.
Yeah, and that these people are heartless. They don't care about your lives. That if we were to take their approach, hundreds of thousands of people would die. So now that there's been almost 900,000 Americans have died, and we took the other approach. What does that say about the other approach? And these egomaniacs don't ever bother to apologize. Well, anyway, apologies are a good thing, I think. I've spent the last 2 years, and I'll spend another year rewriting Yada Ya. The entire series will have 27 books, I believe, before we're done. And a lot of it was to correct mistakes that I had made. I had been way too Christian-oriented in my condemnation and should not have been. I was way too partial to Yosha as the Passover lamb, and I missed the fact that we shouldn't be celebrating his life at all. That it's those that God cares about and celebrates that we can learn from, and so it's that is what we're doing. That's why I've rewritten the books, and it's turned out to be such blessing sounds like a religious term.
No, but
it
makes me happy.
Yeah, it is.
Makes me happy to
you read it now. Yeah, I'm picking it up constantly, and just first the unified theme is gorgeous. Leah was right. We are much better off with a consistent theme all the way through, and all 27 books will have the exact same theme. But everything from the pagination to the margin sets to the layout of it, the back cover cop, it's really well done, and the insight and the translations are so much better, and the insights are so profound. I'm not tooting my horn, I'm tooting Yahweh's horn.
No.
It is really an astonishing read.
It's just amazing what's revealed.
Yes. And so correcting one's mistakes turns out to have been perhaps the most rewarding thing I've ever done. And I say I've ever done. We have quite a team that's doing it. And as I was sharing with Jackie before the show, Yahweh is very happy. He's a proud papa. Together we have done well for his people and for him. Well, happy Shabbat. For those who were offended by my critique of rabbis and Judaism, I would encourage you to read the 3 volumes on the Mikre, the harvest, and then on the appointments, followed by an introduction to God 1 and 2. And once you've done that, if you still want to defend rabbinic Judaism, then I don't think it's possible to read those volumes and still defend the evil that has become rabbinic Judaism. So with that note, let the facts fall where they may. I'm going to be with Yahweh. I hope you will be too. May Yah bless. Happy Shabbat to one and all. Good night.
Yeah, shalom, shalom, friend. Good night.
Good night.